The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off. I've done it again. I've muted myself at the start. Shane Stapleton here on the Hurling Show, as ever, with Michael Verney, brought to you by Bamboo from Torpy, as ever. Michael Verney, you've got Hurley on your chest there. Good to see rather than Hurl.
To be honest with you, I was nearly going to blank out the EY at the end because I just realised that this fundamentally disagrees with everything like I believe in. It's a hurl, not a hurley. But listen, we're sponsored by Torpy Hurleys, I suppose. So we kind of have to promote that as well. But yeah, no, it is a right good busy weekend of hurling, I suppose. And the last little bits of info and insights that we can glean from different squads and different teams, different managers this weekend. So it'd be interesting to see if we see anything different this weekend with Championship only around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And as ever, get your comments in. We'll try and get to them as many as possible and display them on the screen if you want to see your smart alecky comments, your good insight, whatever it might be up there. Load of games going on this weekend. It's the last regulation round of the league. Westmeath against Limerick, Waterford, Tip, Cork, Galway, Antrim, Laois, Clare, Kilkenny, Wexford, Dublin. Plenty more games down through the tiers, which we'll, of course, go into. If you want to get this on audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OurGame, $5 a month, and you can get lots of exclusive content there.
You couldn't go wrong. You couldn't go wrong.
You couldn't bet with a shtick. And we're going live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. So that's the places you can get your comments in. Do you know what? You pointed this out, and an image put up online by Brian McDonald about this, found this illustration of a hurling team in 1887, typically lined out 21 aside. I like the extreme forwards description, #hurling. That is mental looking when you see it like that, 21 aside and the extreme forwards.
It's mad just to think when you see how much space is actually taken up by like 21 players on the field. Imagine if you had it now. What was the first thing that came to your mind, or the first people or players that came to your mind when you thought of extreme forwards? I definitely had a couple in my head. Who would have jumped out there to you?
Oh, extreme forward. That's a tough one. I'm thinking, who doesn't like to move too far, wants the ball to come to them? I mean, then you're moving into the realms of insults then straight away, aren't you?
I don't know about insults, but like literally, Tony Dorn never played, I'd say, anywhere else nearly apart from 14. He was extreme, as in he was on the edge of the 6-yard box the whole time. Jeffrey McGonigal would have been another one. Guys that were just prolific forwards.
Vinnie Murphy, the dub who, of course, played football for the Capital for so long. He was a good hurler as well. So maybe he would have been the man up there. Let that ball into him and just hit the ball in and start celebrating.
Yeah, Niall Sheridan from Longford would have been another one. Park him on the edge of the square and you're guaranteed to get scores as well. But it's probably guys that you can't really maybe envisage them being out the field too much. They were chiefly score getters, and their biggest asset was, being dangerous around that kind of goal area.
Yeah, so let us know who else would be the extreme forward of the era. Actually, I'll just bring that up again. Is there anyone else? So fullbacks, halfbacks, right wing, left wing, centre forwards. No room for midfielders. Who's in midfield?
No, it's funny, isn't it? Even like the left wing and right wing are almost like soccer positions now. Like, you know what I mean? Those wing backs that they talk about now. But I love even, going back when you talk about positions, left half back. Nobody says that anymore. Right or wing half back, as they used to say as well. I love the actual going into actually what the position actually is and what it means. Whereas now it's just like, you're number 5, number 7, or wherever. If in the backs, apart from centre back and full back, you can literally be playing anywhere, and your numbers don't really matter anymore. But 21 players aside, 42 on a hurling pitch. It's hard to believe now.
And I'd say a lot of pulling on the ball first time back then. Keep it moving. Sure, back in the day, wasn't it like you'd have two parishes playing each other, and whoever managed to pull the ball into the other team's parish won?
That's just a war of attrition, isn't it? Just you're literally trying to
bait
the other team back. Yeah, bait the other team back to their parish.
Okay, we'll move into the games. I mean, there's so many games coming this weekend, and we've plenty of talking points we want to touch on, but we're happy to discuss whatever's on your mind too. So as I said, get those comments in, and we'll get to them as much as possible. Actually, we have one in from Lionel Strongjaw, and we'll get to that in a couple of minutes, but it relates to the Westmeath Limerick game, so we'll hold fast for now. You made a very fair point when you said Cork versus Limerick. That was a battle of the pretenders against the contenders.
Yeah, I think so. Like Galway, obviously, were All-Ireland champions in 2017. They were in the final in 18, beating the score. They're probably seen as one of the realistic teams that could beat Limerick or dethrone Limerick. Cork, you're kind of looking at them and you think they have the potential to be there at the business end, but there's also that doubt, whether they could flop as they have in recent years as well. So I think you have one team where generally with Galway, you know exactly what you're going to get from them, and another team in Cork where you're not so sure. Like, it's funny, Ben O'Connor said to me last year when he was playing with Cork, they used to always say, from a betting prospect, you could never back Galway because you never know what you were going to get out of them. It's almost like, Arsenal in soccer. And then he says, basically that Cork have turned into that team where you actually don't know what you're going to get. Now, these were comments he made last year. It remains to be seen whether they will change that this year, but you're still not 100% sure what you're going to get from Cork on a given day.
Well, what we are sure is that this team is going to persist with their playing of the ball out from the back. And I have to say, I said it a couple of times recently, I'm not too overly concerned about how they lost to Limerick last week. Yes, they got battered. They got turned over in their own half. They were made to look ordinary at times. And to be honest, they were made to look less than ordinary in the first quarter when they created just 6 chances to Limerick's 19. And there was a bit of a men against boys feel to it. But I don't think they'll be all that concerned, because they've more season stars to come back in. And some people, and I've had people privately and publicly comment to me that the players that Limerick have to come back are a bit better. But that, while in some cases like Kyle Hayes and Grode Hegarty, that might be true, it's just when Cork dip into their panel, they're probably taking more quality out of their team than Limerick are. So the point being that Limerick's backup wing back and wing forward and all that, they probably have more experience. They probably look physically more athletic at the moment, more conditioned. So when Cork take away from their team, and arguably they had a more changed team than Limerick, then the likelihood of things falling off a cliff, they're just a little bit more. And like, let's say you're a seasoned player who's used to doing quite well against Limerick. If you have lads around you who are struggling with the pace or struggling with the intensity or whatever, the chances of you being able to play as well as you normally did against this Limerick team this time out is less. So I think a rising tide lifts all boats, but it works the opposite way too.
I wonder, is there any merit or is there any interest in the fact that a lot of Cork's physical players, the physical players that they do have, weren't playing against Limerick? And I wonder...
Who's coming to mind when you say that?
Seamus Harnedy definitely would be anyway in attack, because he would be seen as the outball. Like, they didn't have an outball in the half-hour line the other night. Say someone even like Tim O'Mahony as well, a big physical player who's decent in the air too. Obviously, we're still not sure exactly what the story is with Colm Spillane, but you definitely would say they were missing their big, probably physical players the other night, the players that would be able to go toe-to-toe with some of Limerick's bigger players. So they didn't have a plan B as a result of that. There was no long ball they could put down, let's say, on top of a Harnedy. Whereas probably when they play in Munster, that plan B might be there. So while they will probably still go predominantly short, at least if Limerick start pushing up and think they're going to go short the whole time, at least they have an option maybe. But with Harnedy coming out into the half-hour line and putting a few puckouts down on top of him. But I just wonder, was there any coincidence that literally all the players that had out the other night were very, very similar type of players? And I'd imagine they'd have a few rabbits to pull out of a hat when they played them in the Munster Championship.
Yeah, it was, two players that wouldn't be considered overly physical, but, they can take care of themselves. There's no issue with that. Luke Meade and Patrick Horgan came in at half-time, and did that coincide with an improvement in performance, or did Limerick take their foot off the gas? Do Limerick even take the foot off the gas? Is that something that's in their makeup?
No, I think like Luke Meade is kind of not that he's nailed down that centre forward spot, but he's definitely He's definitely, number one for that spot at the moment. And he just introduced an awful lot of energy, an awful lot of know-how, asked different questions of Declan Hannon. And in fairness, Horgan did the same as well. And both looked dangerous when they came in. And I think it was important from a Cork point of view that they didn't take a battering the other night. They put up a solid second half display, having looked like the wheels could come off. So I think those two guys coming in was important. And I think it was a bit of a statement as well. Kingston could have given younger guys more time or whatever, but there's a fine balancing act between giving younger lads time and totally eroding the team's confidence and being beaten by 20 points ahead of a Munster Championship clash. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Our Galway, the one of the perfect prototypes to play before they play Limerick in the Championship. Big physical team who, if you look at how Galway played Limerick that day, Galway forced Limerick to go along when they played them in Salt Hill. They forced them. They didn't let them work through the lines. So it'll be interesting to see, will Galway do the same with Cork? That would upset Cork. So Cork are going to get another chance to maybe learn on the job and try and solve problems on the pitch. If they don't have all these ball winners playing, they're going to have to solve some problems. They're going to have to, if anything, probably accentuate the short game even more. So I think from a Cork point of view, that this is probably a perfect trial run. They wouldn't have wanted to show it maybe too much last week against Limerick, but this is a perfect trial run for playing Limerick. You're playing as close as you'll get to a clone of the Limerick team without actually playing Limerick.
So here's where I think hurling is changing a little bit, because we're talking about Cork working the ball out from the back, that short interchange at the back line, and we're seeing more and more teams doing it. I think that's not really up for debate. Most people would kind of accept that. And again, get your comments in on the back of what we're talking about here. But so it used to be a situation where, as the defending team of a puck out, your full forward line drops 10, 15 yards to split the 21 and the 45, right? So you do that because you want to try and choke off channels to the half back line and say, look, if a cornerback wants to have it, that's fine. He'll eventually just have to truck it long anyway. Now that's changed because teams are now, a cornerback or fullback is going to turn, run it, try and hand pass it, pop it off, stay going off the shoulder, run again. Very much like Gaelic football. It is moving in that direction. I'm not saying that as a negative thing either. It's just that's the way it feels like it's going. So if that's happening and all the puck outs are going to defenders now and even midfielders, and they're happy to turn and go or move the ball back to the goalkeeper to go around a different way again, is that way of setting up from a puck out going to change? That whole thing where the corner or the full forward line drops 10, the half forward line drops 10, the midfield drops to shield the half back line. So is that going to go and be replaced by a high press? So that, right, we're not going to allow you that short option anymore, meaning that maybe there'll be space at the other end for long puck outs, the other end of the field. I think it's possibly kind of added to where the puck out strategy battle is going to go. Now, there might be some teething problems in the meantime, but it has added the whole high press kind of notion to it.
Yeah, well, the high press was non-existent in recent years, because I know we're talking about high press and it's almost like basketball terminology. I know, yeah. But forwards were sitting back, and the reason they were sitting back, why were they sitting back? Because the ball was going to go along, and they wanted triangles of players almost on the breaking ball, and you're cutting off space, making sure that a midfielder or a half forward can't go into a certain area. But if all of a sudden the ball isn't coming down on top of the half forward line, you're not going to still try and cut off those areas of space. You're going to push up on the cornerbacks, try and turn them over there. I think that's probably only natural, and in many ways, we won't get to see the long ball maybe that we're used to, but that's big high pressure play. If teams are pushing up on the cornerbacks, the fullback, the ball is going short, all of a sudden they're swarming in around them on the 30-yard line or in around there. Ball's turned over and it's in the back of net. It will be like football, where a bad kick out or a bad puck out could lead to Paul Durkin's kick out in the 2014 All-Ireland final, basically turned the game. Maybe you could start seeing that in hurling a lot more. It's not something the 2018 league semi-final between Limerick and Tip.
Who could forget?
Yeah, where was it? Jason Ford got the goal in extra time with a sharp puck out. That's in my head. That's the last time I can remember, a big score from an intercepted sharp puck out or something like that. But it's definitely something that we could see an awful lot more of. If teams aren't going to truck it long, then there's no point in you sitting back. But as you say, if teams are starting to push up now, then there's the chance to go long, the same as in football. If you can work that tactic where all of a sudden, if a centre forward wins a ball, there's no cover behind. And from a long puck out, if you can catch a clean puck out, it's like football now when teams play a high press. If the kick out goes out, if a team wins that kick out where there's loads of space in the middle of the field, all of a sudden, everybody's going in one direction. There's no men back. And it actually increases the danger and increases the interest. So that's definitely something you could see. If teams have that out ball or that out player that they can put a puck out down long, and it's now 1-on-1, which it hasn't been for a long, long time, there's big chances to make hay at the other end.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be easy to just lament the olden days when, like, especially as a half-back, and, like, if this kind of plays to your strengths, that a long ball is hit between you and the man, and as the, let's say, half-back, you get to jump all over the back of the guy, of the wing forward that you're marking for or whatever, and get up and catch that high ball. There's, outside of scoring a goal, I don't know if there's anything more pleasurable in hurling than catching a high ball. It really is great, a contested high ball. But a point I wanted to make is, where is this going? And again, get your comments in and let us know what you think with regard to the puckouts. That in Gaelic football, you see now that teams have a formation. Obviously, the Slitter travels twice as far, so that kind of changes things. It's never going to be identical to football. But like, you see formations now that teams have when they're defending a puckout. So they might have like a 4-4-3 or something like that. So that means like 4 inside forwards, 4 maybe half forwards, 3 lads around midfield. The ball isn't going to travel any farther than that. So you can, it doesn't really matter too much about the defence. There's very few goalies that are going to kick all the way into the far 65. Maybe Rory Beggan and a few others can do it. But where is it going to go with hurling? Is it going to be a case where if, let's say, I'm Tipperary and you're Offaly, and you decide that you're going to go along with a puck out, and I'm like, do you know what? If Offaly leave 2 lads in the full forward line, we're just going to ignore them for the puck out, and we're going to turn and run straight away if we lose the puck out. But we're going to have more or less 13 lads, 12 lads that are going to be pushed from the 45 upwards. Now, I know some goalkeepers can carry longer than that, but where is this going to go?
Yeah, it's hard to know where it goes, yeah. There's, in many ways, there's exciting possibilities there. In other ways, potentially then you could see like packed defences, which we're probably seeing to some extent already. And as you say, players are just going to turn and go, and they're going to, abandon their players just to get back into that space and try and fill that area. But it's definitely something that has changed an awful lot. I think Galway are one of the few teams, probably Galway and Limerick. Galway and Limerick do still predominantly go long, unless a team concedes the puck out to them. Limerick went long against Galway. In fairness, maybe that was something to do with Galway making them go long. Galway do generally go long, and there's a simple reason for that. Is because they have a lot of players that can win primary ball. And in fairness, I do think, like with managers, and you can say, oh, Cork should be going long, or Cork need to do this or that. Like, outside of Seamus Harnedy, name me, a really good ball winner that they have in their forward line. I just don't think they have one. That's not having a cut at anyone.
Well,
like
we said before, what's the point in Cork losing the same way?
So there you go. So you cut your cloth to measure. I was chatting to Paddy Bradley yesterday about what Rory Gallagher is doing with Derry, the Derry footballers. And everyone's nearly surprised that Derry aren't playing negative football, maybe that Gallagher is associated with. But he says, why would they play negative football? They've got a load of really, really good forwards. So he's cut his cloth to measure now. He obviously cut his cloth to measure when he was in Donegal and Fermanagh, maybe with a perceived lack of attacking options. He's got a load of attackers now. He's got a load of really good midfielders. He's got Conor Glass now. So you play the style that suits you. So in fairness to Cork, they're not going to, make Egypt to themselves and puck ball down and lose puck out after puck out. And I think the same can be said of Galway. If they have aerial ball winners, that's the way you play. You predominantly play along. So I don't think you can criticize anyone for trying to play to your strengths. It makes perfect sense, if anything. And we talk about styles making fight and styles making games. Cork's style is going to be that's why it's going to be interesting to see Cork coming up against Galway this weekend. You have probably a team playing short and a team playing long to an extent. Now Galway can play through the lines as well. But that makes it really, really interesting.
And you kind of mentioned there, and people will probably have some examples of this themselves, of when have short puckouts gone badly. High profile. You mentioned that goal that Jason Ford got in the league semi-final 3 years ago at this point. The Antrim Clare game, it definitely happened a couple of times there. I remember maybe 1 or 2 of Eibhear Quilligan's going the wrong way, and definitely at the other end for Antrim it happened too, because I think Jared Walsh, who's been brilliant, by the way, and I don't think we've actually touched on him. He's been brilliant at full-back for the Saffrons. He had to pull someone down, was lucky to get away with a sin bin type thing. And I wonder, is it going to happen this weekend against the forward line of Galway? So if you're like, just to look at the team that played there last week, now Joe Canning moved into centre forward, so maybe he'll play there for the full game. But like Conor Whelan's going to be looking to kill you. Brian Concannon is obviously good at hassling around as well. Is Conor Cooney going to be in there? Is Joseph Cooney going to be back in the team? Cahill Mannion also. So they're going to have a lot of players there that are going to put a serious amount of pressure on you if they go short, which they will do. And then the team hasn't been announced just yet. So it'll be interesting to just see, does Kieran Kingston go a bit closer to his starting team now, a few weeks ahead of the Limerick game? It's probably the perfect time for him to try out everything he has.
I'd imagine so. We're still not sure. Like, I'd imagine Damien Callahan would be fullback, but we're still not sure. Actually, I shouldn't say that. No, we do. We probably do know 3 and 6 now at this stage with Callahan and Coleman, but we probably are a bit unsure. Tim O'Mahony has played midfield. He's played a bit at wing back as well. So they do probably need to. They're obviously going to have, I'd say, 1 or 2 challenge games after the league. But you probably want to have a fair idea after the weekend what your formation is going to be. So you probably would expect to see closer to their starting 15 this weekend. And I just think it's interesting. Galway can afford to put that kind of press on with big physical players, the likes of Conor Cooney, the likes of Joseph Cooney, because they want you to lord ball down on top of...
Onto the half-back line that they have. Like, that half-back line is ridiculous. Pádraig Mannion, Daithí Burke and Fintan Burke. If they click together... Like, Fintan Burke is... You could argue he's the best of the 3 in the air, and the other 2s are obviously no slouches. So imagine having to hit, I don't know, 25 long puck-outs on top of them. Best of luck.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think they've tried to... Well, last year they played a sweeper and their half-back line wasn't that secure. Fintan Burke only came on in the All-Ireland semi-final. It does look a lot... the back line does look a lot more solid this year. And I think they're going to try and make teams uncomfortable, and they're going to try and make teams poke the ball down on top of their half-back line, literally like old-school hurling.
Jack Pendergast scored 1-2 off Daithí Burke from centre forward. So is Daithí Burke going to remain at centre back? Now, I'm not saying that's all down to Daithí Burke. Obviously not, because there's an element of holding your position and accepting that your man might get a couple of scores. But your main function here is to ensure that Waterford aren't getting through here for goal after goal after goal. And obviously Waterford did do a nice bit of scoring, but again, you can't put that all down to Daithí Burke. Is he going to remain at 6? Is Gearóid McInerney going to remain full back? And if you're Luke Meade, are you licking your lips at the thought of playing against Daithí Burke here? It's a good test, if nothing else.
I know we're kind of supposed to have some of the answers, but I genuinely don't know. Like,
but that's the brilliant thing about it.
He played 50 minutes against Tip. Then he all of a sudden he ends up out centre back, which are not really expecting. The two of them could easily switch back. Like, Daithí Burke could easily go back into 3, and McInerney could easily go out 6. I don't really know, maybe, but I do think it does look like Shane O'Neill wants more going forward from his half-back line. And with due respect to McInerney, you'd probably say McInerney is more of a holding centre-back.
Well, since 2017, he was dominant, but he hasn't played that same way since. Now, he hasn't been bad or anything like that, but he's been pretty good. And there's always a use for a 6'5" player who can move. So why not put him in full-back?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I just think they probably think maybe they need Daithí Burke's athleticism and the fact that he's just really, really good on the ball as well. He'll break a tackle. I think maybe he's trying to exploit what he's probably seen with Cara Finn and how good he is going forward and give him more of an attacking option. They still have Pádraig Mannion and Fintan Burke to slip back in, 2 really, really good defenders as well who can also offer plenty going forward. But genuinely, I don't know, and we'd be probably fools to predict, but I tell you one thing that is obvious is they have their spoiled for riches at the back anyway. That's definitely one thing. That's one thing for sure anyway. And it's just a matter of kind of putting the pieces in whatever way they see fit.
And Mark Coleman will likely come up against Joe Canning here, assuming that Galway want to kind of show their hand or maybe continue to hone what has really started to work for them. Like, they're really beginning to look like a serious team here. And Evan Nyland, like, he's an option that could play centre forward also, or maybe wing forward, or maybe he could be like a Roman corner forward and decide maybe we'll leave Conor Whelan inside more permanently rather than allowing him to move around the place. I know especially against Tipperary, he was sort of doing a roaming role and Barry Heffernan was following him, and actually Heffernan got the better of him that day. But Evan Nyland, he could play in centre forward. What a test for Mark Coleman now if he's coming up against Joe Canning in this form. Like Canning scored, was it 1-8 the last day, including 1-3 from play, a couple of brilliant flicks throughout the game.
Yeah, I wonder, I'm looking back at the Limerick Cork game again, and I'm just thinking, like, where Cork almost trying to pull the wool over people's eyes in the sense that Coleman followed Cian Lynch everywhere he went and totally sacrificed, I would say, his own game. And he's not a man marker. And
Lynch went to town.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. I just don't see that happening when they play in Championship. I think someone else will be detailed on Cian Lynch. Mark Coleman will definitely not be following him. They didn't play to Mark Coleman's strengths, I think, the other day. And, part of me thinks that wasn't a coincidence, like that was the way they had set up to do it, that they weren't going to show too much. Limerick are probably very confident now that they have a player that can exploit Coleman. Will Coleman play that similar role? I don't see it. If Canning or whoever is playing centre forward the next day or at the weekend against Galway, I don't expect Coleman to be the one that's following them around everywhere. If it's Conor Whelan or whoever it is, there'll be a deep lying midfielder, I'd imagine, coming back. Maybe a Dara Fitzgibbon or whoever's going to be playing midfield beside him there. And Coleman will be let do, I think, what he does best, and that's orchestrate and build attacks. I don't see him, as we said, like, I'm not saying this is negative or anything, but teams will try to make him defend, whereas Cork want him to set up attacks a lot of the time and be the outball, be the option there running off guys' shoulder in the defence. So I don't expect Mark Coleman to be running around kind of like, as my father would say, like a blue arse fly, like he was the last night, like he was against Limerick. I expect them to play to their strengths a lot more.
Yeah, Galway have the best scoring differential after 4 games so far, plus 39, Cork plus 32. So these teams are fairly well shooting the lights out, albeit that both of their tallies are skewed somewhat by the results against Westmeath. Tipperary will be fairly interested to see how this game goes, because while they're playing against Waterford, if they win that game, then they're going to remain top of this thing by virtue of, Cork being a point behind, or Galway actually the head-to-head record there. So they'll be quite interested in this.
I don't know what the hell does anybody the league. This league is. I don't.
The reason now that I would say that is because Tipperary are top of the league roll of honour. Kilkenny are guaranteed being top of the other side of things. If they meet in Championship, now look, it doesn't matter that much at the moment. But in the heat of the hunt, if the season ends,
if it's tipping Kilkenny, it matters a bit more.
Yeah, and but the reason being is that if you're Tipperary, Kilkenny have enough records going at the moment, right? And I'll say that through gritted teeth. But they've enough records going at the moment. If you can keep the League One going at all, I think you want to. And as we said before, there's only so many national titles available every single year. It doesn't define success or failure, but it's nice to have it. It is nice to have it.
Okay, the only thing is, like it's like when Limerick played Clare last year, like nobody really paid any heed to that being a league final. Do you know what I mean? If Tip top the group and Kilkenny top the group, when are they going to meet realistically? An All-Ireland quarter-final, semi-final or final? Imagine you could have a situation where an All-Ireland final is a league and an All-Ireland final, which would be bizarre.
It would, yeah, because even last year seeing Limerick against Clare in the Munster quarter-final as a league final, that's a little odd to see a league title, being presented afterwards.
Imagine, Liam McCarthy's up for grabs. You're like, boys, Liam McCarthy isn't the only prize up for grabs here. There's a league title up for grabs, and you'd literally be laughed out of the place.
Do you expect this to be high scoring just before we move on to the next game?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. Based on what we've seen in the last couple of weekends, I would say so.
Free-taking competition?
Hopefully not. But what we've seen in the last couple of weeks would suggest so. But the only thing is, this game is in Páirc Uí Chaoimh as well, which is, to me, I do think that makes a difference. Like, there's some difference in a game within Pearse Stadium and in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Páirc Uí Chaoimh is, nearly maximum regulation size.
And 200 people at it. I mean, actually, whatever it is about Páirc Uí Chaoimh, it's such a massive bowl that unless you have a big crowd in there, they're probably a little bit lost in there, same as Croke Park. Whereas whatever it is about Thurles, I think the low stands or whatever, the volume, it really seems to reverberate around there.
Any chance you get to accentuate the positives of Tom Semple's field, in fairness,
the field of legends.
You always take it, in fairness.
The field of legends.
I actually love that slogan because it does resonate.
Because it's true,
Yeah, Croke Park is Croke Park. but there is something a bit kind of special about Thurles. Even though, don't forget, the first ever All-Ireland hurling final was played where?
Inside in Burr.
Inside in Burr. Good man.
Was it the sports field in Burr? Is that what it was called?
The sports field in Burr, yeah. It's currently a Tesco, the site of Tesco at the moment.
I don't even know.
There's a history lesson for you.
You know, I want to be a bit smart about it, but I don't even know where to go with that one. Okay, let's move on to Westmeath against Limerick. I mean, it's been tough going for Westmeath so far. You know, they've 4 games played, beaten in all of them, ran a much
average of 22 points, I think, Shane, in the 4 games.
Yeah, running a much changed Waterford pretty close in one of the games. I'm going to go in with a comment from one of our viewers. So Lionel Strongjaw, what did you both think of Colin Coughlin and Cahill O'Neill as potential prospects for the future? I'll start off with you.
Yeah, they're both still raw. They both got a lot of ability. They're raw in the sense that they're raw at senior inter-county level in that, you know, it does take a while to get up to that level. They do also have that raw ability, and you saw Colin Coughlin striding forward the other day and getting a couple of great scores, and then you saw Cahill O'Neill as well coming in and making a massive impact. It's funny, like he played that half against Galway and probably got a bit of a rude awakening, whereas now, you know, his confidence might have taken a small little hit. Came in the other night, was brilliant, got 2 scores. Now you're thinking he could make an impact 5 or 10 minutes off the bench in some sort of game. I don't see either of the two of them playing too much in championship, though. I just, like, if they have all their players available to them, I do think they're more likely to go with the tried and trusted. They're not like a county that's trying to make a breakthrough, where there's maybe gaps in their team or gaps in their squad. So, but they are 2 really, really exciting prospects as well. And even is it Brian O'Grady midfield? I think it was. He showed flashes against Galway as well. Haven't seen too much of him since, but he's another one to keep an eye on. The fact that they're both started the leaving search yesterday is a bit mad. Like, you know, Coughlin and O'Neill. It's a fair statement of, you know, their ability that they're, you know, getting game time for the All-Ireland champions.
Yeah, I think John Kiley's obviously trying to whet their appetite too and give them exposure in games where, you know, the prospects of the county aren't going to live and die on these matches. Colin Coughlin, I mean, to be that size at that age, I mean, that's an impressive feat in the first place. He looks like a good player. I mean, getting 2 points in the space of whatever it was, 60 seconds against Cork, that'll do wonders for his confidence. But it will be a case of biding his time there, because if you look at the options in the half back line, Dan Morrissey can play there if he's not back full back. Barry Nash can go out there. Kyle Hayes has been rezoned. And there are plenty of other options too. So it might be a case of biding his time for Colin. But like in those training matches with the options that we've talked about there, never mind coming up against Tom Morrissey, Gerard Hegarty, David Dempsey, Keane Lynch, and, you know, keep going. If he's able to survive in there, whenever he does sort of make his championship breakthrough in the big games, you know, he's going to be ready for it. Or he's going to be as well prepared as he possibly could be to go out in those big games, because he'd be like to himself, if I can mix it with those guys who are winning Hurler of the Year and so on, you know, I can do it against anybody. And the same with Cahill O'Neill. So we saw him as a minor a couple of years ago, and, you know, he stood head and shoulders above everyone physically, but you kind of felt, even looking at his hurling, that this guy can kick on to another level. So, 2 guys that are obviously moving in the right direction for Limerick.
Lovely position to be in from a manager's point of view, Shane.
Yeah. And he has other players then, like Brian Ryan, Darren O'Connell, the guys you mentioned also. So I think those of us looking on at Limerick were a little bit like, oh God, is this conveyor belt ever going to end? But from their point of view, it's absolutely brilliant. So look at 3 points is all that Limerick have going into this game. But like, I think last weekend is just a solid reminder that they're still the All-Ireland favourites, and probably by a nice bit.
Yeah, and you're maybe thinking coming into that game, you know, are the alarm bells ringing a small bit all of a sudden? Then they've had 2 weeks, and like, is that one of the most impressive displays, or at least, you know, at different stages, probably, you know, one of the most impressive first halves anyway, or halves of hurling that we've seen this league. So I'd say it was a timely reminder of exactly where Limerick are at, and not exactly where they're at, but where they're going to be at probably come championship. One question I would have, Richie English has played nearly all the minutes at cornerback so far. I wonder, will they, with the ease with which he was turned by Jack O'Connor for that goal, I wonder, will they go back to the tried and trusted full back line of probably Finn, Dan Morrissey picked up a small knock against Waterford, but he'd probably feature this weekend. And Barry Nash back in the corner. They do have, like, Mike Casey will probably come back at some stage later in the summer as well. Like, it is a great position to be in, that potentially maybe Richie English, an all-star cornerback, might not necessarily be in their starting 15. They do have an awful lot of options there, particularly at the back.
Well, see, the Mike Casey one I always find quite interesting. You know, you marvelled telling me how good he was on Conor Callahan when the Pierce and Kula faced off a few times in 2018. And that he did. He was really, really good in those games. And he just, you know, even when he came into the team in 2018, so many people talked about his impact and how he marked Johnny Glynn outfit in the All-Ireland final. Does it feel a little bit like all of a sudden Mike Casey's becoming a bit of a forgotten player there, considering the options you've outlined?
Yeah, kind of. Well, it's forgotten for a good reason, Shane, in many ways. Like, he didn't play last year, and he's going to be under pressure to play this year as well. So, like, if you know, not being smart, like, if he was from, we'd say, Clare, they'd be rushing him to get back for championship. But Limerick don't necessarily have to do that. So he has been a bit forgotten, but I think it's just no more than, you know, Tyg de Burke's injury or Pádraig Matney's injury, maybe to be more precise. The nature of a late winter and an early summer, you could end up missing 2 championship seasons, and that could indeed happen with Mike Casey as well. He's not going to be thrown into a championship game without having played any league or anything like that. So no more than Richie English last year. Richie English didn't play a minute of championship last year, even though he was back, togged and training for, you know, probably 2 months before they played the All-Ireland final. They're not in a position where they have to rush guys back in, but he is another option if they pick up knocks or anything later on in the summer.
Yeah, it's been tough going for Westmeath manager Shane O'Neill. I mean, the scoreline that Tipperary put up on them last weekend, it made for fairly ugly reading. You kind of wonder, what does he want to get out of this game? Look, I know how this might sound, but I think in a way he's probably hoping that Limerick dip into the panel here, that he can get some sort of a performance out of the team here. It's just been such tough going. Even when Tipperary went down to 14 men after Robert Byrne got sent off, you know, there was no kind of suggestion that they'll maybe win the rest of the game by 7 or 8 points or whatever and put a decent gloss on the scoreline. It just feels like this is a bit of a hiding to nothing. And this isn't, you know, I mean, like, we get some comments saying, you know, that we're disrespectful of Westmeath. I mean, we're not, and we want to see Westmeath doing well. I mean, we've talked about them for a number of years at this stage, as we have many of the teams that are trying to make that breakthrough. But, you know, I mean, what do you say about it? It does feel like it's going to be a victory by as much as Limerick want it to be.
Yeah, as an Offaly man now, I don't know if I want to see Westmeath doing unbelievably well. Said somewhat tongue-in-cheek, in fairness. But things have definitely gotten a bit tougher for Shane O'Brien because it looks like Davy Glennon, he said, is probably going to miss the rest of the season. He picked up a knock. He picked up a knock in the last week or two. He said he's probably out for the rest of the season. Killian Doyle went off against Tipperary with a hamstring injury. They're not sure how bad that is. So there's 2 of their better players. I think Niall O'Brien missed the last day with injury too. So there's 3 of their better players sidelined, with the potential of Davy Glennon, who in fairness has been one of the bright spots since he came in. He's performed well in each of the games and hit a couple of points in a couple of them as well. So it's definitely not getting any easier. You kind of read out a couple of quotes from an interview that Shane had with Conor McKeown, the Independent, there last week. All the focus is on Joe McDonagh Cup, but if they're missing a couple of big players for the McDonagh, it's not going to get that much easier as well. And there's the notion of coming up against better teams and dropping back a division. There's also which theoretically should be good for a team. They're dropping back in class like a horse dropping down in grade, but unlike a horse, their confidence has taken a battering. So it's finding that balance of, we were playing a higher division, but we also, haven't really been able to mix it with any of the big teams. So the confidence is down. And if they're going to be missing a couple of big players as well, that doesn't make it easy either.
Yeah, and I mean, it is at the risk of repeating ourselves, but maybe if they had to be at the other side of Division 1 over with teams that they've more of a chance against, that might build up their confidence going into the Joe McDonagh. But I'm looking at how they did per quarter against Tipperary. And, in the first quarter, created just 5 chances. The second quarter created just 5 chances. Third quarter created 6 chances. Fourth quarter, now down the stretch, they did create 10 chances. And they probably need to be creating that throughout games. But it turned out that Tipperary created double the amount of chances over the course of the game. And if you've kind of got, I don't know, the more star forwards and you're creating twice as many chances, it's very hard to look beyond getting, a heavy loss. And with the way Limerick moved the ball around, Westmeath are obviously going to play an extra man back. I mean, I think it would be ludicrous if they didn't. But even if they do, Limerick move the ball so well that they're probably going to bypass the sweeper, or even if there's two sweepers. So it's such a tough one. And I'd love to know if anyone's got a comment out there what they think that Westmeath should do this weekend. I mean, it's just very, very difficult.
Here's one for you, Shane. Limerick haven't hit many goals. I think they've only hit one goal since the Tipperary game last year. We would have a fair chance of seeing a new points record this weekend, I'd say. Like, it could... Would you? It's not inconceivable to say that they could hit 45 points plus.
Yeah, Cork hit 40 against them a few years ago, remember?
Yeah, Limerick, you're talking about scoring chances. Limerick created the guts of 60 last weekend, was it?
Yeah, Limerick did. Let me just double check.
I think it was the guts of 60. I think it could have been 58. So, like, if they level up in front of the post,
56. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not inconceivable that they could hit 45 points against. With due respect to Westmeath, a lower class opposition than Cork. So it's kind of hard to see positives this weekend for Westmeath.
Yeah, I'm just going to run through some of the comments we're getting here because obviously we want you to get lots of them in. Shane, don't walk out of this like you did for Friday's crappy quiz. That was in the off the ball days. One day sensationally walked out of the crappy quiz. That was great. It was
not like you had to throw ties out of the pram.
That was good fun, to be fair. Galway versus the All Blacks. Who wins, guys? The poor old All Blacks don't stand a chance. They wouldn't hurl spuds to ducks.
Was it Big Dan? Big Dan Shannon said the Limerick half back line is bigger than the Munster second row. So the Galway, I don't know about the Galway half back line, but if you put Joseph Cooney, Joe Canning, who was a decent rugby player, and a couple more, so Jack Canning played rugby as well. So Jesus, they have a third of a team or a fifth of a team already.
But you shouldn't be comparing them to Munster. Munster don't win anything, and I'm saying that as a Munster man. We'll move on here. Can Tipperary beat Conor McGregor in 12 rounds? I think if he couldn't knock out an old man sitting at a stool at a pub, I think he's got Tipperary knocking him out pretty handy.
He still beats Poirier next month, but go on, we can move on.
But sorry, now hold on. When did Conor McGregor last beat a fighter who was at the peak of their career? And obviously he didn't beat Nate Diaz in that second fight. That was a decision from the judges that made no sense.
I think if you look at how UFC is scored, you will see that was exactly the decision should have been made. He won three rounds of the fight.
It was a joke decision. No, he didn't. Sure, that's opinion anyway. He didn't.
No, it's definitely not. I've watched the fight back several times since. If you go back through how the fights are scored.
No, you just love Conor. Everyone calls him Conor when they're these fanboys. You're a fanboy of Conor.
If you go back through the rules of UFC, which you don't know anything about, but in fairness to you, you're a good
I'll fight any man.
You're a good man to talk about things you don't know about. you want to be part. You want to basically take Tony Hoolan's job there some of the time as well. So in fairness to you, I'll give you that. You're a good man for a hot take. But if you go down through the rules and the scoring system of UFC, anybody that knows anything about UFC, and particularly the pros and the pundits, will tell you that McGregor won that second fight.
Okay, so even if we were to say that we were to go on my side of things, when did he last win a fight against a fighter in their prime? And I would say that Aldo was at the end of his prime. He was at the wrong side of his prime when he was
undefeated. He was undefeated in 5 years.
And he hasn't poked the ball since.
He has poked a few balls since. He's in around the bantamweight title. Eddie Alvarez was in the prime when he beat him. You have to remember. Are we going to say
Donald Cerrone? What a top fighter he was. Anyway, look, we're talking too much about UFC. That was Conor's only decent. No, it wasn't even a decent win. Donald
he had a
Cerrone.
2 or 3 year layoff in the middle of it as well. You're manipulating the facts.
Yeah, that sounds like something we both do. We'll move on to Aiden 91. Makes them, takes them, frees. We'll cut out a lot of diving. Most lads don't want to be hitting frees. I think we kind of touched on that before.
I like that one, Shane. I like the idea. I think it's a time saver. I think it makes the game more interesting as well. It's a trial. If we're trialing so many things, I no issue with trialing something like that.
What player right now would you rate the best that is not under county panel? That's from James 6,500. That's very hard off the top of the head. So we definitely want people getting in with their comments on that one.
I don't know I don't know how many guys that aren't on their county panel. Like Shane Bennett would have been one in Waterford, but he's back on the county panel.
Conor Lehane. Conor
Lehane, maybe, yeah. But Conor Lehane hasn't been too consistent over the last couple of years, and Cork obviously thought they needed to try something different.
Hodge Collins? On form, when he's on top form, if he had that form in 2013 again, it's obviously going back a long way. But those are a couple of decent ones. Actually, two main players in that final in 2013, or those finals in 2013, Lahan and Podge Collins. So if anyone has any other suggestions, please let us know. It's always an interesting.
Collins was good in 2018, Shane, as well. Like, he turned that game against Tip. Like, that's only 3 years ago.
Yeah, very fair point. Yeah, so get your comments in on that. We'll touch on a couple more. Adrian McGrath, when Cork won in 2019, this is against Limerick, obviously, Bill Cooper, Mark Ellis, Owen Cadigan and Aidan Walsh stood up to the power. Steve McDonald came on at half-time for Sean O'Donoghue and Christopher Joyce for Robert Downey after half-time, all replaced by runners now. That's an interesting point. And also Adrian follows up, but there's also the fact that Nash, Flanagan and Donoghue are in the side now, bigger than the lads that they will replace Mulcahy and indirectly Mike Casey and English. So John...
Just saying, that's a really interesting point on those Cork players. Cork were after being kind of, I don't know if you'd say bullied by Tip the week before, but they had taken a fair pacing from Tip the week before. And with due respect, Cork manned up the week against Limerick. They came in and were really, really physical. Cadigan was roguish, against Gallan. McDonald was a real physical force. Whereas, they don't seem to have those players as much this time around.
Shots being fired in all directions, lads. Haha, says John Hoard. There are, of course, Alex Winter with, I presume he's just laughing at that comment. Jerry Kelly Burris-Lee. Geez, I get killed down home for not thinking of Jerry Kelly Burris-Lee. And the reason being, he obviously was massive for Burris-Lee en route to the All-Ireland final in 2020 and scored 7 points in that All-Ireland final against Ballyhale, 6 of them from play. Really, really unbelievable performance that day.
And also en route. Jerry Kelly is class, but he's unproven at county level and he's going into a really, really high-level county squad.
Sure, how can he prove himself if he's not given a chance?
Yeah, but if he was playing with someone like, if he was in Offaly or if he was in Laois or somewhere like that, he'd be starring. It would be the same in Limerick or anywhere else.
Well, I'll tell you my real bone of contention with this is Tipperary have a lot of forwards that aren't too dissimilar. Like, they're silky, they can, do a bit of magic or whatever. And Jerry Kelly has some great tricks up his sleeve. He's a nice little feint and sidestep the other way with the ball. But he's a different type of player. There's a bit more of a brute in him. He's just a different option, and that's why I'd like to see him given a chance anyway.
Are you saying, did you just brand a lot of the tip forwards as the same type of players? Are you saying that a lot of them don't have substance and they only have style?
What, the team that won the All-Ireland 2 years ago? No, you wouldn't say that.
That's not what I said. You just said the Tip had a load of the same type of forwards, and then you said Jerry Kelly had a kind of a brute force. Are you saying that there's not a lot of substance to the Tip forwards that are there?
No, there's plenty of substance. Don't twist my words, right?
Hello, backtracker.
Just don't twist my words. But there are a lot of teams that are sort of like front runners. That when Tipperary on top, these lads will knock over 5, 6, 7 points in a game.
Oh, this is indicting stuff.
It's not. That's kind of reflective of the magic that's there. But you and I both know you need a few Dan McCormicks in there. Obviously, I'm pumping Burris-Lee here again. But you need a few Dan McCormicks in the team if some of the other lads are going to get a chance to show off those Rolex wrists that you see in Tipperary.
Tip forwards have no heart. Stapleton.
Look, get your comments in. Keep this clown down.
Jerry Kelly is a good one, though, because in other counties, he would be Lord for other counties. He's so talented.
Yeah, David Benson's in with a comment. Nice avatar there, David. Bit of pink, a splash of pink and yellow in the background. Jack Guiney, Paddy Foley, Jack Cullen, Podge Doran, and a few others for Wexford. Yeah, interesting.
Jack Guiney, they're all guys. Particularly, Guiney's a big physical force. Paddy Foley is probably one of the standouts, having opted out. There's in fairness, and Podge Doran, a big left-handed forward as well. Jack Cullen, one of the best club players in Wexford too. There's 4 within one panel, fairness. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, we'll just keep on the comments here because some of them are very good. Lads, a bit off topic now, but who is the best player playing in Division 2? This is from Tony F95. And are there any other standout players down the divisions that should be playing at a higher level? We haven't prepared that one, so off the top of the head, right, who's standing out for the likes of Offaly? I mean, Kerry, Shane Conway, no doubt about that. You'll be able to speak about Offaly better than anyone. I know Ben Keneally at centre-back. He's a player who looked comfortable at Liam McCarthy level. Mouse Kavanagh with Carlo. There's plenty of players that would fall into that bracket. Even going down to Kildare as well, there's a lot of players shooting the lights out there.
Yeah, in Offaly, definitely say Ben Keneally at centre back. Owen Cahill, my own club mate. Liam Langton has put up serious scores in the league. For Kildare, you'd probably be looking at someone like Jack Sheridan or James Burke. But as I said in previous shows, they have 6 or 7 that would play at a high level. Donegal, probably looking at Danny Cullen, maybe Davin Flynn, Declan Coulter. There's a lot of, like, there was a good one. Ronan Crowley used to always shoot the lights out for Lancashire, but they can't play this year anymore. But there's plenty of guys there. I know it's always said, that, different guys would, work with higher tier counties, but a lot of these guys really would. Like Shane Conway, I don't care, would fit in with anything. Imagine Shane Conway playing, like he plays his college tournament at UCC and won Fitzgibbon Hurler Deer. Imagine him slipping in on that Cork team. Like, he'd be absolutely ideal for the style that they're playing. He'd be perfect for it.
Gerard O'Kelly Lynch is putting up big scores for Sligo too. Nisha Waldron, who of course was doing TG Cahill co-commentary for Antrim against Wexford last Sunday, he says Colin Fennelly, which is a very fair point, and then he also talks about the Derry team that he played for himself a couple of years ago: Cormac O'Doherty, Shane McGuigan and Micheál McGrath. Aidan91 has unfairly said Shane turning on his own. So, not from me. I would never turn on my own. Tip her back. Tip will always be back. And then John DYDX, lads, the hook is an illegal tackle in the rule book. This is huge. It shows just how badly the rules have been neglected. Michael, we can chat today around lunchtime. Twitter, solve GA tackle rules.
Yeah, no.
So you've been teed up for lunchtime now.
No, Johnny has been on to me on Twitter about this. Yeah, they've gone through the rule book and they maintain that the hook is actually an illegal tackle. So it's actually not in the rules. And they're tagging several different people on Twitter with they've gone through the rules and look like they're trying to find a solution to how to get the physicality back in hurling. So yeah, looking forward to chat to Johnny at lunchtime today.
Okay, and then Will has tweeted in saying, or on Facebook or YouTube, it said, Verney going for the old D'Artagnan French Musketeer look with mustache and the hair. I'd love to see a few photoshops of that, so send them in and we'll display them on the screen.
The Count of Monte Cristo, and he watched it recently. Edmond Dantes.
Okay, Alexander Dumas will be writing about boys like you. So let's talk.
It's dumbass.
Yeah. Okay, geez, we've been caught up on the brilliant comments for so long. We've kind of neglected the matches. So let's move on to Waterford against Tipperary this weekend. Liam Sheedy against Liam Cahill, the current incumbent with Tipperary, against the man who many feel will be next in. I think Liam Cahill is happy to make a statement against Tipperary if he can at all. Now, he's definitely like as blue and gold as they come. He's always kind of maintained that big time, and he knows a lot of these Tipperary players that are coming through haven't managed them underage. But I think he'd like to get a win here.
Yeah, I've said it to you before, Shane. Anytime when I was in Banner College managing them against Burr, you definitely don't want to be. You definitely want it to be the result and the performance to reflect well on you. You're obviously in an opposite corner. But almost when you're playing against your own, in many ways, you nearly want to win it more. Yeah, he's Tipperary to the core, but they'll definitely be doing everything they can to get a result here. And there's also the high probability, or not high probability, but the probability that they will meet in a Munster semi-final as well. So I suppose they'll both be trying to learn things about the other. Waterford in particular won't be focusing too much on Tip because they play Clare first. But Tip will definitely be seeing what little nuggets they can glean from Waterford. But definitely Liam Cahill has made plenty of statements in recent years, be it at underage or be it with Waterford last year and even beating Limerick a couple of weeks ago. I think the big thing with Cahill is like he's going to have Irla Daly back this weekend. How's he going to shape his defence? Because, Tip will run them ragged and run straight down the heart of that defence if the gaps are left there. So it's going to be interesting to see. He's got about a month to plug holes before they play a championship, and that's the top priority. They're going to put up a decent score and be pretty potent at the other end, but it's just the amount that they're leaking. Like they conceded 9 goals between Cork and Galway. Was it 525?
522 and 428.
Yeah, like they're huge scores to be conceding. Like that's his sole priority, nothing else.
Yeah, I'm sure Waterford fans out there would have no interest in hearing me talking about Liam Cahill seeing this somewhat as a way to put himself in position for the Tipperary job later down the line. They want to talk about their team and their team only, and rightly so. Conor Prunty obviously looking very good at full back. Cahill Lyons 5 points against Galway the last day. Do you know what? Sometimes like the swashbuckling defenders, are the defenders the reason that they're putting up 428, or is there just not enough work happening further up the field? They have a lot of players with pace and scoring ability up at the top end of the field, but are they protecting the back line? Like, why is it so open back there?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Like, if you look at someone like Jack Fagan, he's not going to light it up on the scoreboard, but he'll help your defence massively, and he'll drop back and cover all this ground. So I've said it to you before about Tip, the likes of Bonner and that. The work that they do going forward is big, obviously, but the work that they do getting in hooks and blocks and tackles and denying good ball going into the forward line, that's as much of a benefit as anything they'll do at the far end. So it's kind of... Go on.
I was going to say, would you, like, at the moment, Kevin Moran has been used off the bench. He came on for the last 12 minutes the last day. Would you rather, like, have him as a defensive shield at midfield and just say, look, don't worry too much about man marking anyone at midfield. We just want you as a shield in front of your half back line. Allow Jamie Barnes to do the creative stuff. Allow Jack Fagan to come back into midfield and another half forward, maybe Neil Montgomery if you're to go on the team last weekend. But just so you have the smarts and experience of Kevin Moran out there. And at 34, if he can last 70 minutes, brilliant. If he can last 40 minutes, brilliant, or whatever. Do you see a role for him starting anymore, or is it going to be more impact sub?
No, I do, even though the teams that they've played or that they've picked so far and the role that he has played would suggest that there may not be a role for him. I'm only just a starting role. That's what it looks like. Now, saying that, he could have been carrying a knock or might not be at full fitness, but come championship, I still think there's a starting position for him, definitely. He can't be, written off just based on last year's All-Ireland final. If they're worried about, him being able to track a Tom Morrissey or a Goro Hegarty or someone like that, like, there's loads of other roles he can play. He can play 6, he can play 7, he can play midfield, he can play half forward. To me, there's definitely a role. And as you say, I think that defensive role, that kind of, that smart defensive role where he's, particularly if they're probably going to push Austin Gleeson back up the pitch, they need to pull back a bit more. They need to be a bit more solid around the centre. So would it be inconceivable to see maybe Iarla Daly playing centre back and Moran providing them with a bit of cover, and all of a sudden, teams aren't scoring 4 or 5 goals against them and they're only able to break through for 1 or 2? That'd make a massive difference. But I still think he has an awful lot to offer. I saw him come on today against Limerick and he kind of nearly slipped into a sweeper position at different times. I think he's still got a lot to offer, I do.
I'm not sure though, like, you're talking about Austin Gleeson being pushed up the field, and we talked about it on Monday, a couple of the sort of forwards tackles that he put in on a couple of the Galway attackers, which were, giving up frees, and he certainly wasn't the only reason. I mean, conceding 428 certainly isn't down to your centre back and your centre back alone, and as we've both probably said, he can play centre back, but should he go back up the field? And Derek McGrath, he said last weekend, it's something that if Waterford aren't careful, they'll follow them around for years. The reality is we need Austin everywhere. All right, but you only can have him in one place. And now that we look at a team putting up, the scoreline they got last weekend was 322. Most years that would be enough to win you a match, pretty much any match. I'm not quite sure if it is anymore, certainly not going on what we've seen in recent times. But if you look at that forward line, and more so what Liam Cahill is trying to do with it. Like, you might say most of these players, Austin Gleeson's obviously better than that player. He's obviously better than that player. But what a role like Neil Montgomery at wing forward, maybe he's not looking for an Austin Gleeson type player there. But if you have a forward line with Neil Montgomery, Jack Prendergast, Kieran Bennett, Desi Hutchinson, Shane Bennett, Stephen Bennett, so all the Bennetts in there, and you're thinking, where do I get Jack Fagan in there? Where do I get Austin Gleeson in there? Desi Hutchinson obviously scoring 1-3, looks like maybe he's ready to step up to another level again this year. You just wonder, is Liam Cahill moving to a stage where it's actually might be hard to put Ozzy Gleeson back in the forward line? And, it's only a year, well, it's probably a year and maybe 3 or 4 months ago now that Ozzy played in the half back line against Tipperary and got himself sent off in a league game. I just wonder, is it going to happen? And is it going to be a situation whereby Liam will head into the summer and it'll almost be like, what am I going to do with Ozzy, even though he should be probably building his team around it?
I know what you're saying, and he's obviously had 2 games at centre back now. I think it's simple enough. Like you try and resurrect the role that he played in last year's championship, where as things went on, he got better and better, and it was probably one of their best players in the All Ireland final. I'm not saying you have to build an attack around him. I don't think you can build an attack around him when you have Stephen Bennett and maybe Dessie Hutchinson there as well. Stephen Bennett was obviously nominated for Hurler of the Year last year. He was their best forward throughout the course of the championship, despite you not putting him on your all-star team. I think,
are we really going to go down this road?
Well, it was absolutely ridiculous. The team was nearly perfect.
Also, we are going down this road.
The team was nearly perfect until you would not budge over that. But Austin Gleeson, to me, I think it's just too big of a move to put him at 6 now, and I just don't think for the team, I just don't think he has those defensive instincts. The first instinct has to be to defend, and I'm not sure if he has that. I would let him go with his attacking instincts up front. And as you say about the forward line, then it's a matter of marrying that balance between, you have to have a Jack Fagan with your Stephen Bennett and your Dessie Hutchinson and your Austin Gleeson, and you probably need to have a Jack. You need to have your, not that's saying that they don't work, but you need to have your grafters that will create the opportunities for the guys that are going to shoot the lights out. And to me, I don't think it's a bad thing, Shane. I think he's got loads of options there. I think he's got plenty of options up front, and Gleeson is another one that would be central to his attack. I just think for the team, it makes more sense for him to be in an attacking role.
Yeah. I'm interested in some of the matchups that we might see this weekend, assuming that both managers go with pretty strong teams. Maybe Liam Cahill will think that Munster quarter-final against Clare is a little bit too close for comfort now at this stage. Like I did against Westmeath, maybe I'll change the team around a little bit. But let's assume that, at this stage, the teams haven't been picked. But let's assume that they go pretty full strength. I'm looking forward to seeing Cahill Barrett against Dessie Hutchinson. I'm looking forward to seeing Barry Heffernan against, I think, Stephen Bennett. Who does Paddy Maher go up against if he's full back? Does he go against Shane Bennett? Is that the right matchup for him? I think there's plenty of interesting battles that are going to happen there. I think Robert Byrne, by dint of getting that red card for like a silly little flick out last weekend against Westmeath, he might have hurt his chances for the championship now, because if everyone plays, you're going to have a half back line, probably with Seamus Kennedy centre back, Brendan Maher one wing, Ronan Maher the other. And if Liam Sheedy decided, okay, I want to put more pace on the wing and have a bit more of a Declan Hannon-esque centre back, I might put Brendan at 6 and put Seamus at 7. So I think Robert Byrne probably loses out there, but could lose out there. And Paddy Cahill has done an awful lot of good for himself. Got another couple of points the other day against Westmeath. Got on the ball a lot, as he did early in the Galway game. Dan McCormick, I think now, is just going to sit midfield. We're moving very closely to getting a championship 15 for Tipperary here, but there could be some good matchups here, assuming both teams put out strong sides.
Yeah, Prunty and Seamus Callan would be another interesting one too. 2 big physical, forces of nature almost.
Callan obviously came back last week, got a point, but you could see he's going to need a little bit of time to work himself back to form, because it's not like he took over the game in any way, shape or form.
That's always been the case with him, though, Shane. He does need a couple of games under his belt. Some players are like that. Some players can come back in and light it up straight away. He generally just eases himself into it. He'll get another probably game under his belt this weekend, probably a challenge game, and then he'll be ready to go for Munster Championship and back up to full pace. But there's, like Paddy Cahill potentially maybe would pick up Jamie Byrne, either that or maybe if Dan McCormick is midfield, they might put him in maybe a stopper kind of a role on Jamie Byrne, maybe to try and neutralise his effect. But there's definitely a lot of interesting matchups, and the fact that they're probably going to meet in Munster Championship makes it even more interesting. And the tip subplot of the incumbent with the possible successor with Sheedy and Cahill is interesting too. And Mikey Bevan's been involved as well. They Bevans. Sorry, I think it was Jake Morris that said that Liam Cahill is almost like a father figure to a lot of those tip guys. So he's coaching and managing the team against guys that he's would have brought up through the minor and under 20 and under 21 ranks. So he knows them better than most as well. So there's a lot of intriguing subplots, even though Sheedy had absolutely zero interest in talking about any subplots, and he just said it was not Liam against Liam, it was Tip against Waterford. Yeah, and just a reminder, we're brought to you by Torpy and the Bamboo Hurley. So if you want to get 10% off that, go to the Torpy website, which is underneath the video, and put in the promo code OurGames. You'll get some strike of a ball out of it. And just a reminder, we're also
going live on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at the moment. And if you want to get the audio podcast, they're now at the Our Game Supporters Club on Patreon. So go to patreon.com/Our Game if you want to support the channel. It's €5 a month there. So I do want to talk about the Tipperary forward line and look ahead to Championship. Now, we could have the prospect of Noel McGrath centre forward against Austin Gleeson. That could happen. That would be an interesting test for Gleeson. Certainly, Noel McGrath seems to be in good form. But you know the way we've talked about stopping teams working the ball out from a puck out, a short puck out, and whether it's going to be Cork, Limerick, whoever it might be. This is an area that we think that Tipperary could have certain issues, and like you've kind of suggested that I'm turning on my own earlier when I'm starting to refer to players being front runners, that they can kind of get lots of scores when Tipperary are on top. So what balance do Tipperary need to find to ensure that they have the pace and harrying in that forward line when they don't have the ball, to go with the quality when they are kind of on top? Like Michael Breen was started wing forward the last day. He certainly has the pace to get around and hassle and harry, no doubt about that. And Noel McGrath can do it also. Maybe he's not the paciest, but he's obviously got lots of quality. Dan McCormick has gone back to midfield, so you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Does Niall O'Mara come back in? Can you have a team whereby Jason Ford, Bubbles, Seamus Callanan and John McGrath, do all of those get into the team? It's a tough balance because you do need them to be able to strip the ball off the opposition.
Yeah, 100%. I don't envisage a situation in too many games where you're going to have Noel McGrath, Jason Ford, John McGrath and Bubbles on the field at the same time or starting games together.
And does this even mean that, like, Seamus Callanan is brilliant at hassling and harrying? Like, we've seen him many times do those 60 and 70-yard runs. That the one place you can't afford to have somebody who's not a great tackler or not good at getting around after lads is in the half back line, because they're going to walk up the field and pin a ball perfectly to an inside forward or create a 2-on-1 run off each other's shoulders, and all of a sudden you're in bother as a defence there. Like, Seamus Callanan is Tipperary's best inside forward, but in some ways the only place you can carry someone who doesn't have great work rate is probably in the full forward line. So might Seamus Callanan end up on the half forward line just by virtue of that, the fact that he's a great work rate and he's a big man?
I don't see it.
You don't want to do it, but can you see a case why Tipperary might have to look at that?
I understand what you're saying. I think if he played a full league and had an uninterrupted preparation, it's more of a possibility. I just think I think he'd end up expending too much energy. If you're at full fitness, I think he'd be fine and he'd be able to mix, unbelievable work rate with getting the scores on the board. Whereas if your fitness is not, where it should be because of injury, he could just end up spending his time running around making tackles and not be able to do it on the scoreboard where it matters. I think it's interesting from 8 to 15. If Alan Flynn is playing midfield this year, I think for Tip to win big games, Alan Flynn, Michael Breen and Dan McCormick nearly have to be playing the whole time from 8 to 15, in my opinion. Just because, especially if you're going to mix that substance with the silk that they have in attack, it is finding that balance. And I said last week, and I have no issue with saying, I do think Dan McCormick is nearly Tipperary's most important player now, just with what he offers and what he almost offsets of other players. He lets them express themselves more because he's able to get through the work maybe that they're not able to do, and he allows them to flourish. It's a lot of it is unglamorous, but those players are worth a fortune to you.
So who drops out of the team then? Because you can't have all the magicians that we've talked about. Someone has to drop out of the team. Are you going to drop John McGrath? I know his form was a bit indifferent last year, but he's been generally key when Tipperary have won All-Irelands in the past 5 years. Are you going to drop Bubbles? I mean, some people in Tipperary feel that this is the most talented hurler that Tipperary have. When he's going bad, generally Tipper going bad. When he's flying, Tipperary are flying and they're able to stick the knife into teams. Jason Ford, he's clearly on the freeze and there's nobody else in that conversation at the moment. I mean, who are we dropping here? Jake Morris is already on the bench and Mark Yo.
Yeah, wouldn't be that surprised if Bubbles' kind of impact role of 2016 is kind of reprised again this year. I'm not sure.
He scored 1-5 in that All-Ireland as a starter.
Yeah, he came on the All-Ireland semi-final and turned the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but the point is that when Tip are at their very best, generally he's absolutely flying.
Yeah, no, true enough. I do think the game has changed a bit in the sense that he won't just get away with putting it on the scoreboard. He's going to have to put in the hard yards as well. And it's just, as I said, it's just kind of finding that balance there. I don't expect him, John McGrath, Noel McGrath, and Jason Ford to be starting in the 1 forward line in a big championship game this year. I just don't see it.
Okay, well, yesterday, Kieran Clark was announced as the PwC Player of the Month, the Antrim forward. Now, I had a bit of a chat with him in a group setting. Now, he had the camera held at a funny out position, but we'll play a little clip in terms of his thoughts on Antrim's improvement this year. As most people know, they beat Clare the first day out, drew at Wexford, and gave creditable performances against both Dublin and Kilkenny. So here's what he had to say.
Yeah, well, the thing that's different this year is, we believe we can compete with these teams, and we believe we can go far. But I suppose it's about building on what we've done in our last game and the game before that. So I guess you're always aiming for us to be the best you can be and compete against the the so-called big teams. Well, since Darren's come in the last couple of years, it's a very professional setup. There's nothing, if there's nothing you want for, if you're ever needing something, that's there for you, and you don't have to ask. It's probably the first year that we had, all the best players in the county playing for us. They want to commit, and as you can see with our size of our panel, I think it was 36 of a panel. Which for the first time ever we've ever had a panel that size, and people wanting to come onto it.
Okay, so that's Kieran Clark, PwC Player of the Month.
He's better at shooting the lights out than setting up his camera, I'd say. Now, I'd say he might be too used to that, but if he keeps playing like he is, he'll be getting used to it. Yeah,
and this weekend, Antrim will fancy themselves. Once again, they're in Corrigan Park. They're going to have a decent crowd in there. They're going to be hosting Laois. So I think Antrim will feel very good about getting another result here.
Oh, I think so, yeah. Like their form is, in fairness, Laois's second half probably against Kilkenny was probably their best half of the year. But Antrim have really hit the ground running. They've, a draw, a win over two teams. A draw with Wexford, a win over Clare, competitive results against Dublin and Kilkenny. So I think they'll definitely fancy it. The league has worked out well for them with 3 games in Corrigan Park as well. And even having the fans there the last day. And I know, we've kind of mentioned there that Antrim have the 16th man, and it definitely did make a big difference the other day, in fairness to them. Definitely think that they'll be seeing this as a winnable game. And if they finish, 1B with 2 wins, a draw, and 2 relatively narrow losses, I think they'd be absolutely delighted going into championship. Yeah.
Do you see, these are obviously not exactly pulling up trees at the moment. Where do you think they're at?
They were getting a couple of players back, which is just crucial. Picky Maher played his first match of the year against Kilkenny. Willie Duffy came on as well. Aina Lyons came on too. So they're only, they're probably chasing their tail a bit. They're only getting back to where they would have been at the start if it had some of these players available to them. But I was impressed with the second half against Kilkenny and how they were working the ball and how they persisted with that kind of, playing through the lines. Particularly, they've played a sweeper generally as well. But they stuck with it, and the second half was good against Kilkenny. So I think they're a bit behind where they'd like to be, but they're getting there, I think. And I think Cheddar will be happy enough that there's, finally a couple of kind of green shoots shown, because the first couple of games were disappointing enough.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Do you think hurling is entertaining at the moment? If we're to look at what Owen Larkin had to say, he goes, he's talking about the boredom of games. And he says, it doesn't look like the same game I played anyway. I've watched a good few games over the last few weeks, and that word that springs to my mind is boredom. I watched Kilkenny and Wexford, and it was just so loose, with lads running everywhere to keep possession at all costs. TJ hit 118 that day, 15 from frees, but there was no spectacle to that game at all, and that applies to most of what I've seen. And when I watched Galway against Waterford last week, and I wonder afterwards, is this because I'd watched, so many games that weekend?
That's definitely playing into it. Yeah.
Bit of fatigue. But even the day before that, as Galway-Waterford was going on, I looked up at the clock, saw a massive scoreline, saw there was still 20 minutes to go, and I was like, really? There's another 20 minutes of this? And even the day before, Dublin against Clare, Tony Kelly knocked over 15 frees, some of them with, from his own half. It is a little frustrating at the moment. I don't feel terminal about the situation. I think it'll be quite different in the summer when crowds are in there, but you can't ignore it.
No, you can't ignore it. It's not been the most exciting league. I do think it's getting better though. If you compare the first 2 weekends to the third weekend and even last weekend, like Antrim and Wexford was brilliant last weekend. There were bits of Limerick and Clare that I found very enjoyable too. And in fairness, the first half in Salt Hill was good, even if the scoring was slightly askewed. I just put up a poll there on Twitter before and just asked that question, whether people are entertained by hurling at the moment. 32.4% yes, 24.8% no, and 42.9% championship will be different. And I would be of that opinion as well. I do think things will be a good bit different in championship. We'll have people in all going well, or some people at least. I think the pressure will be ramped up. You have to, it's kind of half said it earlier on in the show. Like, this league really doesn't mean anything if you're avoiding relegation and not in that relegation scrap. Like, there's not really anything on the line. They are essentially challenge games, whereas championship is high stakes and more pressure. Pressure leads to mistakes. Pressure leads to more drama as well. And I would expect it to be a good bit different in championship. Far, far less open anyway, and not the high scoring feasts maybe that we're used to in recent weekends.
I don't think Laois will want to lose 5 games out of 5 though, and go into the championship on that sort of form. I think it's an important game for them in a way. And I know I mentioned Jared Walsh earlier. I'm looking forward to his battle, which I expect will happen with Ross King. I think that could be good. Like, there's plenty of good hurlers out in the field, and I think we could be in for a decent match there.
No, I think it'd be a decent game as well. It was interesting to hear what Cheddar said after the Kilkenny game. He said, I think there's an awful lot of people speaking rubbish about hurling, people giving out about teams able to score 30 points. I don't know any hurling person who would agree with some of the rules that are going on now, and it's very difficult for referees to interpret those properly and try to suit everybody. I said it on the Monday show. I do think there's a lot of mad things going on in hurling at the moment. I do think the ball is a bit too light. I think the hurls are obviously better quality. The players are stronger. I think there's more frees. The play has not been let go as much, which is obviously going to lead to more frees. It's going to lead to more scores. There's very little meaning to the league as well, which means that you've played in challenge games where the scores have been, stupid scores. You go play in championship then and it's 15 points to 14 because it's a real arm wrestle of a championship game. So, an interesting actually point on Laois. Our game had a tweet the other day, an interesting fact that someone didn't know about hurling or about GA, and one of the viewers wrote in that Laois hitting 22 points against Kilkenny the other day was the first time that Laois had broken the 20-point mark against any of the big three in league or championship, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just move on to another comment there as well, coming in from, let's see here. Yeah, from Nisha again. Nisha, good regular commenter, and we want to see plenty more of them coming in. He goes, no real pre-season rustiness and refs clamping down on the tackles, and then the new style of hurling that teams are adapting to all comes into play. Summer will be class. I kind of agree with that. And he's definitely talking, the crowds is definitely such a big thing, because the decision making is so much cooler when you don't have someone screaming at you or 20 people screaming at you. I mean, even think of contesting a ball on the sideline in front of the crowd or in front of the two management teams. I mean, there's some difference when there's 500 people roaring at you versus nobody.
Yeah, we played Rhinus the other night in a Division 1 league game, and I think there were 100 people at it, but it felt like there was a couple of hundred there, and it just increased the pressure on everybody. And as a result, you watch snooker, I watch snooker as well. We love seeing big frames where they're getting centuries, but the 1985 World Final where people are making mistakes that. If anything, that's more dramatic than the big high scoring shootouts. And I do expect crowds coming back, the pressure of championship to lead to that as well. And as Nisha said as well, referees getting accustomed to rules, players getting accustomed to rules as well. So I definitely do think, I'd agree with his optimism on the summer.
Yeah, actually, I wonder, do other people have examples? Was it the World Snooker Championship semi-final last year, Anthony McGill and Kyron Wilson, that they both kept making mistakes, and the drama was just, there's nothing quite like mistake after mistake to really add to something. Clare against Kilkenny this weekend. We haven't talked about Brian Cody just yet, and JJ Delaney dismissing the idle talk around Brian Cody. And I definitely think that Brian Cody's there for as long as he wants. And this is obviously the 6th year in a row now that they'll be trying to claim back that All-Ireland title. Do you buy into it that this idle talk? I mean, JJ Delaney wouldn't have brought it up, only he was asked about it, but it does just seem to be a recurring theme. And most of that is based on the idea that he won't evolve, or this notion that he wouldn't evolve. But I think recent games suggest that the team is trying to do precisely that.
Well, it's definitely not idle talk, because it is a topic of big discussion down in Kilkenny. And that, it's not idle talk, because an awful lot of people have strong opinions on it, be it that he should stay or should he go. I do agree with you to a fair extent. I think he goes whenever he wants to go. I hope it's not a situation like with Mickey Hart in Tyrone, where he's more pushed than actually leaving himself. But just interesting what JJ had to say. Just on Brian Cody, he said, you take the last couple of years, he got to an All-Ireland final, he won a Leinster Championship last year. For any other inter-county manager, that's a successful couple of years. There's no point in saying any different. But like Kilkenny's and Cody's standards, he's almost a culprit or of his own success almost.
A victim even?
A victim, yeah. They've been so successful that they're the standards that he's built up now. And that's what people expect. And, you love going on about the drive for 5 or the mix for 6 this year. It's 6 years since the last one, your last All-Ireland or whatever. But that's been discussed now, because Kilkenny are expected to win All-Irelands, regardless of the personnel he has available to him. When you state the facts of what they've done in recent years, a league in 18, beating Limerick in 19, getting to an All-Ireland final, winning Leinster in 20, like they're not bad seasons for anybody else.
Yeah, Kilkenny have won 4 games from 4, largely been impressive. This weekend, as we're saying now, it's against Clare. I think of all the games, I always wanted to see Clare against Kilkenny in Championship, especially around 2013, 14, 15, and we never got it. It was so frustrating, wasn't it? What do you think we're going to see from this game this weekend? As we've kind of said before, including the shadow boxing game against Wexford, when we kind of felt that we were being sold a little bit of a pup by the performance that day that we saw by the model county. Tony Kelly, what are Kilkenny going to try and do to shut him down a little bit? Will Colm Galvin start to get his hand on the ball a little bit more in this game? You already talked about Callan against Westmeath working himself into form. I think Colm Galvin stayed on for most of the game in his return against Dublin after injury, and obviously he's been out for quite some time. But I really can't remember him being on the ball at all in the game. So they'll want to give him a chance to get his form up too. Then Aaron Shanahan, who, while Owen O'Donnell was on the field before the second yellow card, he done all right. Like, he caught a puck out one stage, threw it over the bar with O'Donnell trailing in his wake. But O'Donnell won a lot of that kind of matchup. And then centre back, of course, John Conlon, another opportunity to see how he goes wearing the number 6 jersey. So there's a lot of interesting subplots in this.
Yeah, the Colm Galvin one is interesting. If you look at Adrian Mullen the first day against Dublin, hardly felt the weight of the ball, and you're thinking maybe this guy's going to struggle to come back. All of a sudden, he's worked himself back into form. I'd say Galvin will be the same. Like Galvin is a natural, really. It's just a matter of physically getting back up to that level. Like, for all the doom and gloom in Clare, like, I think they've turned a corner big time from that opening weekend against Antrim. They, produced a good result against Dublin last weekend. Obviously, Tony Kelly is central to it. But like, when you go down through the personnel they have, just say Colm Galvin is back and he's playing well. You're looking at, Rory Hayes, Conor Cleary, Tony Kelly, Cathal Malone, Shane O'Donnell, David Reedy, Aaron Shanahan, Colm Galvin. They still have the bulk of a really, really good team. They don't have maybe the same squads as some of the other top teams. But I do think it looks like they've settled down a good bit and turned the corner. If there was going to be freak results in the league, they were probably going to be early. And that, obviously, it was proven that the Antrim result wasn't that much of a freak, given what they've done since, and even drawn with Wexford last weekend. But I think Clare would be happy enough, and this is the perfect way to tee up that Waterford game in the Championship now. They're going down to Kilkenny. Exactly, like, it's a perfect scenario for Loan, in the sense, okay, we know we're going to get it. We know we're going to get a really tough match this weekend. Doesn't matter whether it's, a league game with nothing on the line or whatever it is. Kilkenny are going to be Kilkenny, and they're going to give us a real honest, good game. So I think this is absolutely teed up for Loan. It's perfect preparation. They're out in Championship I think it's 2 weeks' time. I think they're playing the 26th. So this is perfect preparation. They probably won't play a challenge game before then. So I'd say they'd be looking to learn a lot, and they'd be looking to get another game into Galvin's legs.
Yeah, I agree with you that this Clare team is coming together so that they can produce the best they're able to produce. But I still don't think it's going to be an All-Ireland or anything like that.
No, God, no, I wouldn't think that.
Yeah.
But no more than last year, Shane, they probably exceeded expectations. All you can look for is to probably max out of what you have. And I think they're getting, like, what would be a successful year for Clare? Beating Waterford in the Munster quarter-final would be a start anyway. Putting it up to Tip in a Munster semi-final and then maybe going on a run through the back door.
Do you know what? You know the way we often talk about how Clare had a lot of these similar size profile players, diminutive guys who were nippy and, good hurlers and tasty and all that kind of stuff. There was a point in the Dublin game last weekend when the half back line was Paddy Fitzpatrick. He must be 6'7".
Yeah, he's a monster. Yeah.
John Conlon has always been a powerful player. And then Davy Fitzgerald, who is, I don't know, he must be 6'4" as well, and he can move. Like, they put serious size in that team. And then you had Cahill Malone midfield. Tony Kelly, obviously one of the best hurlers in the entire game around him. Mark Rogers, a young player. I'm moved on from the size conversation now, but Mark Rogers, good player coming through. Ian Galvin, there's form that they can get out of him. He can go to another level. Shane O'Donnell's obviously very good. And then Aidan McCarthy, who's shaping up to be the best young hurler in the game. Not far off. And, who else is in the conversation? Please get your comments in. There's a lot of good. Like even Aaron Fitzgerald in cornerback, I thought he did quite well. So there's a lot of good there.
For all the doom and gloom, and people talking about, how they're going to be in trouble and whenever Tony Kelly finishes, that's in the distance at the moment.
You know what? Want the conversation that surrounded the team after they lost to Antrim, that, everyone thought crisis mode now, where, and Antrim have showed that they're actually very, very good, and that wasn't just an outlier performance. But it would really put an end to any sort of negativity on the field if they could beat Kilkenny this weekend.
Big time, yeah. No, big time. And I think when you put down their players there, obviously Tony Kelly's probably a step above anyone there, but I hadn't even mentioned Aidan McCarthy in that 7 or 8, really, really good players. I think, I think Clare could still cause a surprise or two yet this year.
Okay. Can you name the only Tip club to have won an All-Ireland Féile at an under-14? A current Tip player was on the panel. God, I'm terrible with remembering stuff like that.
I'm gonna say Seamus Kennedy, and it might have been football, no?
Okay, well, if someone has the answer, send that in to us. Well, James 6500 obviously knows the answer, so send that in to us. Another question in from Liam B01. Lads, do you think a heavier ball will actually make things worse? Will teams not try to run the ball more now? It will turn into a Gaelic with teams using blanket defences and then running the ball out. There is kind of an element of that that's going to happen. And even just if people, I'm not sure if people are aware or not, but the GA is putting together an advisory group to examine the Slitter, because of the debate that's going on in the high score. And so Larry McCarthy, GA president, he's asked Ned Quinn, who's the chairman secretary of Kilkenny, to chair a group that will include Pat Daly, who's part of the association's director of organisation and culture, planning and development. And basically the idea will be looking for guidelines around the Slitters. So there was a story in the Indo, and it kind of read that the insertion of a chip into Slitters is at an advanced stage, which could help to regulate their use in games to ensure that they're an approved product with the correct dimensions. The hope is that the chip Slitter will be in place for inter-county games in 2022. Most Slitters are now produced in Asia for local suppliers. That presents standardisation issues, especially with the depth of the rims, which have become flatter and narrower and generating less drag and meeting less resistance in flight, thus allowing them to travel further. So
we need to throw all the balls into a big bucket of cold water the night before any championship match, and that'll solve it. Now, I'm not talking about increasing the weight massively. It's only it might only be a couple of grams, but it would make a difference. It would just it would make going back, striking a free from your own 65, it would make it a small bit more of an effort. When it becomes more of an effort, the accuracy is likely to be skewed. Remember Ken McGrath had that free for Waterford in the All-Ireland semi-final against Cork years ago, and he put everything into it, and it hits off the post. I think it was from his own 65 or that. I'm just saying that's what we need. It doesn't mean you still can't score from 100 yards. It's just going to be a small bit more difficult. Yeah,
I kind of agree with that. I'm not looking to take 50% off the distance of the ball. I'm looking to take maybe 20-25% off. And as you're saying, those 100-yard frees, if they can't be knocked over, people are looking for a quick free, which gets the game going again, which stops all the breaks in play and all that.
The way I'll put it to you, Shane, there's no way you should be able to replicate Jason Ford's free. That shouldn't be possible. A bog average stick man with a hybrid kind of a strike, there is no way that you should be able to replicate that.
A hybrid strike?
Yeah,
amid all the insults, a hybrid strike.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't like it definitely wasn't a crisp, like full motion like you'd see of one of the good strikers. I'm not sure what way you were striking it, to be honest with you.
I was striking it over the bar 3 times out of 5 for 100 yards on the sideline. What more do you want, you? Brian White in with a comment here. He goes, Kilkenny will have the same problems they've had in the last few years once they meet the better teams. I'd like him to expand on that. If you want to come in with a further comment, I'd be very interested to know what you mean by that. Certainly, Kilkenny have come up a little bit short in the last couple of years, and a lot of that has been to do with mid-game meltdowns. And Henry Shefflin did say last week in a press call that he feels that that's behind them. But it isn't until we get to the white-hot heat of summer that we'll see if that's the case or not. And if a team does manage to tie down TJ Reid, which of course is a tough task, but now and again, there's a player out there who might be able to do it, and it might be the right day to capitalise on it. Like, do you think it's as simple as saying, right, the meltdowns are in the rearview mirror and on we go? I mean, I don't think you can forget the meltdowns.
No, until we see evidence, no. My thing would be, the midfield would definitely be one area that I'd be worried about, and I'd probably be worried about the cornerback area as well, the 2 cornerbacks, just to see, especially if Conor Delaney, who was probably their best defender last year, if he's not going to be fit to play a championship, there definitely will be question marks hanging over them there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Nisha points out there, I got the distance because of the bamboo slitter or the bamboo hurley, and we are sponsored by Torpy's Bamboo Stick. Get 10% off that using the promo code OurGame. The link to where you can get the hurley is underneath the video on YouTube. So any final thoughts on Kilkenny, Clare against Kilkenny this weekend? I don't feel that Brian Lohan's a man for shadow boxing, and we know Brian Cody isn't.
No, I think they'll both be going fairly gung-ho. It's probably one of the more interesting games of the weekend, I'd say, because I think you can take it on face value, and what you see is what you're going to get with both of them, I think.
Yeah. Wexford against Dublin this weekend is another big game. Davy Fitzgerald, he's banned for the game after accepting a 2-match ban after last weekend's...
Is he back in his box?
His altercation against Darren Gleeson. Yeah, I mean, I was there in 2017 when he had a touchline ban, that altercation with Jason Ford, and they erected a two-way mirror in the press box in Wexford Park. And Davy, like, when Wexford beat Kilkenny for the first time in years in the championship, he came out screaming and roaring and all this kind of stuff. Not quite sure if that's going to be the situation this time. But the offence, it was classified as any type of physical interference with an opposing player or team official, and that was under Room 7.2 alphabet soup or whatever. So it merits a two-match ban. He's accepted the penalty, so he's going to sit out this game against Dublin and the Leinster quarter-final against Laois. Is it that much of a sanction, really? It's not like he's missing the Leinster final.
No, but he could potentially miss a game that could see them knocked out of the Leinster Championship. I think it was the case. He was actually suspended when they played Limerick when they played Laois in 17 as well. He wasn't in his box. He was just up at the back of the stand in a Moore Park. So funny that he's going to be suspended those 2 times that they played Laois. Does it make much of a difference? Not particularly, I'd say. But I'd say he'll be hoping that, the fact that he was suspended in 17 and ended up going on a good run and having a decent season, that it's going to replicate this year. I would just have worries about Wexford. I'm not too sure. I think they're fairly predictable at the moment, and even Rory O'Connor, I don't know how bad the knock was that he picked up last weekend. Just not sure. They're starting to look like, I know they have loads of different plans, but they are starting to look like a bit of a one-trick pony at the moment. I can't see them doing too much this year on all evidence of what I've seen so far. And generally in 17 and 19, when they did perform in championship, they had performed really well throughout the league, and I don't think you can say the same this year. Yeah,
there's no getting away from the fact that since the 2018 season, Wexford won a couple of Leinster games that year, and obviously that was coming on the back of 2017 when they got to the first Leinster final since 2005, if I remember correctly. They won just 2 championship games in 2019, albeit getting to the All-Ireland semi-final, and probably should have beaten Tipperary that day when Tip were down to 14 men and there was a 5-point lead for Wexford. But they won just 2 games that season. One was against Kilkenny in the Leinster final. The other was against Carlow, who they'd always expect to beat. Lost last year's 2 games by a grand total of 22 points combined. So based on the league form we've seen this year, the way they lost so heavily to Kilkenny, the fact that they were poor for long stretches against Clare, but did turn it around, so you can't ignore that. I don't see an All-Ireland charge from Wexford this year.
No, I'd be the same, Shane. an All-Ireland quarter-final, I think would be a good outcome for them this year. And that's a long, long way behind, what they have come to expect now. I think they're 25-1 to win All-Ireland, and I couldn't have them. They're just not. They're not in that top 5 equation for me at the moment.
Yeah, and then a comment in here from Alex Winter. True or false, Shane? Always wears a pair of sky blue socks when Dublin plays Wexford. I don't really know what you mean there. So you might throw in an old comma or a full stop to give me some guidance of what way I'm supposed to read that sentence. Sorry, Alex, I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just not fully sure what you mean by that one. So Davy, we're not going to see him on the sideline in these next 2 matches. You have made this point recently that he's a bit more reluctant to talk. He's a bit more reticent than he used to be when maybe in the past, as he said himself, as a younger man, he might have given it both barrels on things.
Yeah, no, he's definitely, there's been a couple of times recently where, he didn't want to talk about the situation in Clare, or even, the ongoing thing with his dad in Clare, where, there's been online abuse and different things like that.
Paul Galvin's comments, he didn't want to comment on that. Paul Galvin's
comments, yeah. And that's like Davy was on the Late Show only a couple of months ago talking about the online abuse he got. He didn't want to talk about the comments that Paul Galvin made. He didn't really want to talk about the close contacts case and how that affected Clare as well. So he seems a lot more reluctant to talk. It's like, I think why Davy is appreciated so much is that he generally does shoot from the hip, and he gives us all plenty to talk about. And then you have Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, pulling out of the French Open because she, didn't basically want the stress of the press conferences and things like that. And I think it's an interesting one now. It's finding a balance. Like GA players and managers, at the end of the day, to me, I think every time you talk about GA or talk about yourself or talk about anything, you are promoting the games. That's my opinion on it anyway. That every time you come out, you're doing your bit to promote the games. And we do need, it's so much harder. You know how much harder it is to get an interview with a player unless they're getting an award or unless there's some sort of a media obligation that they must do. I think personally that there is a duty on people involved in the GA to speak out, for people to find out more about their character, to find out more about what makes them tick, to find out more about the setup that they're involved in, because I think it raises interest even more. That's just my own thought, but it does look like it's leaning the other way, where there's going to be less people talking, less people promoting the games. And at the end of the day, like me and you can talk and promote the games, but like the high profile players coming out and talking about an upcoming match, or talking about, an injury that they overcome, or talking about, the hardships that normal people encounter in everyday life, I think that's priceless to the promotion of our games.
Yeah, and I think people buy into it more when they get to learn that character. And obviously there's a balance to be found here. Some people aren't comfortable with public speaking, some people are. I mean, like sometimes when I have this conversation with people, they say, well, look, yourself and the likes of Verney, you're going to do a bit of mouthing and sneering each other and all that kind of stuff, and you're relaxed, you're used to it. But then the flip side is, once you get into a sport, you kind of know what you're getting into. I mean, Naomi Osaka, she got into that career in tennis. And, if you're going to be a professional athlete, you kind of have to, you're going to see from years out, right? If I get to the top of the game, this is what I'm going to have to face. And like, she pulled out of the French Open. She's number 1 in the world. She talked about mental health issues. We see it also, and I mean, you have to take that at face value. You can't say to somebody, you're talking nonsense. And obviously mental health is something that has to, of course, be taken seriously. But, then you see the Rowing Ireland coming out talking, about a media ban ahead of the Olympics, and they're talking about managing public expectations and protecting the rowers' mental health. And I mean, again, you have to take it at face value, but if everyone says mental health, it's at some point, like, not everyone suffers from mental health issues, and in some, not everyone likes every aspect of their job, but you still have to go and do it. Like, I'm going to have to go and sit down and do some technical aspects and writing articles and all that stuff later, and I'd rather have someone else do it for me. But it's part of the game. And if you're going to be a top class athlete, the whole buy-in is like, if you're number 1 in the world, you're going to become the richest athlete. So for example, Naomi Osaka is the richest tennis player out there. She's number 1, possibly even the richest female athlete in the world at the moment. But like, there's a price to be paid for that. You can't have your cake and eat it. And people say, oh, you're cruel, mental health issues. absolutely fine. That could be the case. It could absolutely be the case. But when you come into the Lions, then you have to expect that. I mean, where do you think all the money is going to come from to fund this? Like, there's sponsor. Like, if you look at a tennis player, a soccer player, Champions League or whatever, behind them, it's nothing but advertising, even like product promotion put in front of them. If you watch the Ireland soccer team in the last week or so, Tipperary Water is put in front of them. All these kind of things are part of it. And that player doesn't become the richest whatever in the world if you don't have all this money supporting it. So you kind of have to accept to some degree, if you want your sport in the limelight, you're going to have to talk to the media. And I think Davy shifts newspapers, what he says. So when he doesn't talk as much, it probably helps spread the word less of GA. But the problem isn't really managers talking. It's them stopping their players. Like, players should be allowed to speak and not made it seem like it's taboo to do it. I mean, look at other sports. When everyone is allowed to talk away the finest, it doesn't impact results. Like, if everyone can talk away, nobody's getting an edge. But what were your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, and I genuinely think I think it's a trust issue with a lot of managers not letting players talk. And I always find it peculiar that a manager could trust a player to enforce a game plan on the pitch, but yet he wouldn't trust him to give his views on whatever outside of the pitch. And genuinely, like, when we talk about, if you're talking to a player 2 weeks before a match, you talk about the match for about 2 or 3 minutes, because people aren't going to say, "Oh, we're gunning for Wexford. Yeah, we can't wait." You don't say that. You might say that privately, but
you want personality, like.
Yeah, you want to like what do you work at? You had a cruciate injury a year ago. How difficult was that to overcome? You want to find out, who were their heroes growing up. That's all the really interesting stuff you want to find out. And I think players, you can buy into players an awful lot more when you know more about them. That's why, like, Jack McCaffrey wouldn't speak that often, but by Jesus, when he spoke, he was so interesting and so articulate, and you learn so much about him, be it his love of Harry Potter or, his work as a doctor or whatever it was, and the challenges that all that brought. And people love hearing about people like that. Interesting that comment from Darren Clear there, that sport has gone too politically correct. I wouldn't disagree with that either. It's almost like you have to be so careful, and of treading on people's toes or anything like that. I just think, with regards to the GAA, I think it's an amateur organisation. I think you do your best to promote it where possible. That's my opinion on it. It's all about promoting it to younger people and getting more people playing our games. That's my view on it.
Yeah, you see the other thing that happens too is how these things are promoted in the media. You'll have a certain cause that's going on, then massive companies will look at these causes and think, well, how can we sort of make ourselves look, put ourselves in a sort of morally superior, very good light here. They back that cause. Then the companies that they're sponsoring, and there are these massive sports companies and other types of companies, financial institutions, so on and so forth, that sponsor these companies or these teams or whatever. So because the big company has got on and looking to be moral superior, the team that they're supporting or the media company they're supporting, they'll be like, we better get on board with this, and it becomes a bit of a cycle. That's not to say that all of these things are wrong. Some of them are absolutely right. Some of those causes are right. Plenty of people do have mental health issues. And as always, it needs to be taken seriously when somebody 100%, says it.
Yeah.
But there's another side to it too that we need to talk about. So we're not coming down hard on any particular person here. But, if sports aren't brought out into the limelight, i.e. the sports people talk, it's going to be very hard for it to grab the market share and kind of the next generation thinking, okay, I'm going to go and play hurling, football, tennis, whatever. So that's just the conversation. And just a comment here from Jimmy Juice's bar. Bang on, lads. Too much feelings before facts. Crack in sport now. It's gone daft. Now, not everyone will agree with that, but get your comments in the other way if you don't. Or, if you want to agree with that, please let us know. So just any other final thoughts on the Wexford game against Dublin this weekend? I watched Dublin last weekend. Not overly impressive. I still think that there is the makings of a good team here, and I'm hoping that we'll see a big burst for the summer, but not entirely blown away. And just actually, Alex Winter has said, true or false, Shane, always wears a pair of blue socks, sky blue socks, when Dublin play Wexford. So obviously he's saying I've got Matty Kenny and a few of the Tula lads on my side, But yeah, any thoughts then on Dublin after last weekend? Any thoughts on Wexford going into this game?
No, both teams probably have a kind of a point to prove to some extent. There's a cloud hanging over both of them, I would say, heading into championship, but probably more so Dublin. Dublin just seem to have really slipped back into the pack and are nearly falling away from the pack, in my view. And both teams need a bit of a G up before championship. So I do think this probably takes on a bit more significance than just a round 5 league game. A big performance from either, I think, would be a nice little feather in their cap going into championship.
Yeah. Okay. So just a reminder again, we're coming to you live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Brought to you by Torpy and the Bamboo Hurley. So please go there. The link is under the video description. Use the promo code OurGame for 10% off. Also, if you want to get the audio podcast, we've recently launched the Our Game Supporters Club on Patreon. So for a $5 a month, you can get lots of exclusive content there and get the audio podcast. There's maybe 8 to 10 hurling shows every month and plenty of football shows in there as well. So $5 a month is a good way to support the channel. Now, a talking point, Dan Shanahan on why hurling is his therapy. We've talked about this before, how much we enjoy the old puck around and how it's very good for the head. But you were talking to him, so do you want to just call out or read out the quote that he gave you?
Yeah, I rang Dan last week and I said... some of the quotes I couldn't put into the piece, but I just said, Dan, I'd say you're delighted to be just having a general chit chat before the interview started. I said, say you're delighted to be back doing a bit of training. He just said, lad, outrageous. You could just actually feel the enthusiasm pouring out of him just to be back on the pitch. He's turned 44 in January. He made his senior debut with Lismore in 1993. This is his 29th club season. And I just asking him about going back to the pitch and what it means to him. And he just said, I just love going up to the field and doing my bit. I love hitting ball over and back the field with the lads. I do all the running that I can, but it's obviously not as fast as before. He just said, hurling is in my veins. It's in the blood. It's the way I was brought up. And he just said, I was brought up going to the field in muck and shite, doing the hard stuff, and it's like an old drug to me. And it's just like, I think people mightn't verbalize it maybe like that, but I think so many people could resonate with that. It is kind of like therapy, just going up to the pitch, puck and ball, challenging yourself against different lads, having a chat, the release mentally almost you get. You've had different days where you'd be up to your eyes at work, no more than I have. You go down to the field and you're just able to completely forget about it. It's great. The only thing I've ever that could even anyway compare it to is where you just completely switch off. I've got into a bit of sea swimming now. And you get into the water and it's that cold and your body is that shocked that you cannot think of anything else. Anything you brought with you before you jumped into the water, you can't think about it because it's just your mind is just only thinking of that. And it's the same when you go training, I think. You're just able to forget about everything. It's just such a release. And that's why lads like Dan and many other lads will stay doing it as long as it's physically possible.
Yeah, sure. How many times have you been kind of dreading training and then afterwards you're like, oh, thank God I went for that. What a boost it was. And while you mentioned Dan in his 29th season, I put out a tweet on the Our Game HQ on Twitter the other day saying, tell us one mind-blowing GA fact that none of our followers will believe. And at TipGirl79 said, a man from Tip once scored a goal and a point at the same time. Before going on, Dennis Hendrick of Rossgray. He played junior with Rossgray in his 60s, I'd say, or in the 60s. He got the ball out near the middle of the field. He went on a bit of a solo run, hit the Slitter so hard it broke in 2 halves. It went over the bar and the other half rattled back to the net.
Brilliant.
Rossgray won by a point.
That's brilliant.
It is. That's very good. So we'll move on from that. I mean, let us know what your thoughts are on hurling or playing Gaelic football, whatever it is, both brilliant sports. Wicklow against Offaly this weekend. Offaly are back up to Division 1 next year, so there aren't too many concerns going into this game. But it is a battle of Michael Fennelly on one sideline and Owen Larkin on the other. Yeah,
obviously 2 teammates with Kilkenny for many years. Probably 2 guys that are looking into this game in different perspectives. Michael Fennelly is 4 wins from 4. Offaly have been very good. They've essentially, as I was saying to someone yesterday, they've essentially had their 4 games won by half time and put up massive scores en route. Whereas Wicklow have really, really struggled so far. They shipped a big score again to Carlow last weekend. Owen Larkin is in as coach with them. From an Offaly point of view, things are going well. I just was chatting to Ben Keneally the other day. I asked him how how have things clicked, or what's clicked in the 6 or 7 months since they were beaten by Down last November. And he just said it's probably the whole panel buying into everything. Maybe last year we didn't have full buy-in to it, but it's hard to know. Everybody knows their job and is trusting each other and believing in ourselves. We've had a lot of disappointments, especially last year. Don't like to say that you're using that as fuel, but it's in the back of your mind. It's definitely after helping us get through these games. It's hard to put the finger on whatever it is, but it's working. And I just thought, like, it's funny, like, how a defeat or a bad performance can be a motivator. It's not, I don't think it's a good long-term motivator, but it's definitely a good short-term motivator. How many times, like, can you think of any examples in your career where, people love we were written off or this kind of thing? And it's such a basic stimulator, but it stimulates so many people. Someone said, Stapleton wasn't worth it, whatever, and so he couldn't make the Bursa League team and he's coming up here or whatever. That's people, it does motivate. I've had several different instances in my career where you've been written off and you're just...
When you couldn't make the Wicklow team.
That's true. Couldn't make the Wicklow team. Amazingly, I often say I could have been Christy Ring and I wouldn't have made the Wicklow team for whatever reason.
Yeah, they were all against you here. So you're feeling good about Offaly going into the Christy Ring this year, and I suppose everyone is just like, this is probably kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but if Offaly were in the Joe McDonagh this year, do you think Offaly would win it?
They beat a lot of Joe McDonagh teams fairly convincingly already. They've beaten Carlow, beaten Down, and beaten Kerry. So yeah, potentially, yeah. Like they should have no issues whatsoever in the Christy Ring, barring an unmitigated disaster. It's impossible to see them not winning the Christy Ring.
Yeah, and so Down obviously suffered a heavy defeat to Offaly last weekend. They'll be looking to bounce back against Meath. Paul Sheehan, he's doing well. He's scoring for fun at the moment. This will be in front of 500 fans. So, it'll be a nice little, even for the Meath players. They would have been playing against maybe 100 or 200 this weekend, but they'll go straight into the Lions Den in front of 500.
Yeah, I've worn the long coat up in Ballycran before, so at least if they have a few people around shouting at them, it won't be too bad. Meath have kind of struggled in this campaign as well. They've only got that one win against Wicklow, whereas in fairness, at different stages last Sunday, Down did look decent enough, so I'd probably favour Down going into that game. But it's great to have people back, a significant amount of people back. I wonder, this might be a silly question, but I wonder, any Down viewers, will there be 500 people at that match? Next Sunday? I'm not sure if there will. Maybe there'll be an appetite for it, having missed out on all the games. And then the other 2A game at the weekend is Carlow and Kerry, who would have been seen as the top two in 2A. Many people would have thought that this would have been a game to decide who was top in the group, but Carlow have been beaten twice, beaten by Offaly, beaten by Down. Kerry were beaten by Offaly as well, so it's a clash between the second and third, and there's not really too much on the line. And I know Kerry have a couple of injuries coming into the game as well.
Yeah, and Carlow have had significant injuries throughout the league, so they'll be hoping that they get more lads back as time goes on. Mayo are against Kildare this weekend, and Derry are against Roscommon. That's also in Division 2B. So Kildare, they're going unbelievably good guns at the moment, and I'd say more or less looking to ensure that they get promoted in this game. Like the three wins from 3 games. Donegal have 4 points from 4 games, Mayo 4 from 4, Derry are second last, and Roscommon are bottom with no points as well. Then we're also Tyrone are against Sligo this weekend. Tyrone can leapfrog the 8th county with a win here, and then Longford are against Monaghan, which is the bottom of the table clash. Any final thoughts before we finish up?
No, as I said, it's round 5 of the league, but there are a couple of games that are kind of more important than others. I would say Wexford and Dublin, while there's nothing on the line, both need to make a bit of a statement. And Clare and Kilkenny, I think, is an interesting one too. That's just outside of even the 1A games. And hopefully we've seen better action each week as the weeks have gone on, and I expect the same again this weekend. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking forward to a massive weekend of hurling. As I said, if you want to get the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/our game, $5 a month. Lots of exclusive content there. And a reminder once more that we're brought to you by Bamboo. Use the Bamboo Hurley from Torpy. Use the promo code our game and you'll get 10% off. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OURGAME